Okay, well, thank you very much, and it's wonderful. It's lovely to see such a full audience for an anthropological lecture. I've been interested, as Michael said, in human adaptation for many years. In fact, I think I started in about 1968. But what I want to do is sort of take you on a journey through prehistory and talk about the significance of diet in our human evolutionary past. But where I want to start is more recently. Now, many of you, this actually appeared on the cover of The Economist magazine a few years ago. And I think it's a pretty good summary of what is going on with human diet in recent times. But what's also interesting is if you look at the chart up at the top, this increase in obesity, in overweight that we have, is really a fairly recent phenomenon. Just fortuitously, on Monday, in the New York Times, there was an op-ed by a professor of medicine from University of San Francisco, UC San Francisco. And what he was saying was that between 1950 and 2000, we actually eat now 25% more calories than we did in 1950. We eat 67% more added oil in our diet. We eat 40% more sugar, and we eat 40% more meat. And if you look at the increase up there, we have the US in red, but the majority of the developing nations are also following the same trend. Now, as we all know, this has spawned a huge industry in healthy eating. And what I think we should sort of keep in perspective is this pretty much sums it up. You avoid fatty meats, you eat your veggies, and you get your daily exercise. But where I want to start with here is this industry we have in what's known as the paleo diet. And I think we've all heard of it, and all heard that, it's so easy a caveman can do it. It's simple, why don't we just go back to this type of diet? But the question is, what is a caveman diet? Again, a few years ago in the New York Times, they ran an article on New Age urban cavemen, and they actually titled it Ancestor Envy. And what a lot of this is, to somebody who's researched the evolution of the human diet, is fantasy about what our Paleolithic ancestors actually ate. The premise that a lot of people that adhere to the paleo diet work on is the fact that there has been no evolution since the Paleolithic, and that there is something we can call a paleo diet. Now, there's also another issue involved with the paleo diet, and I couldn't resist showing this. This is an Alex Gregory cartoon from the New Yorker. And something just isn't right about this. If they were keeling over when they, at 30 years old. So we have to keep this whole diet craze in perspective. Now, there's been some very interesting and exciting new research that's come out. And I want to start with a site called Predmosty that's in the Czech Republic. And this is a site that was occupied during the height of the last glacial. You have in this area huts made out of mammoth bones and all. But what's come out in fact just last month, by using isotope analysis, we're able to actually determine what the cavemen actually ate, as well as what some of the other animals that are found in the site said. Now, another interesting thing about Predmost is they have what they think are the earliest evidence of domesticated dogs. Now, these are actually part domesticated gray wolves, they think. But this particular skull was found with a mammoth bone stuck in its mouth. And you can't actually see it from the picture, but the skulls have been broken and the brains have been taken out. The argument these are actually domesticated or semi-domesticated is based on the fact that the structure of their faces are much shorter, smaller than you would find in free-ranging wolves and all. Now, there's a reason I'm bringing up the dogs, because by using stable isotope analysis, and this is basically you are what you eat. If you look at the carbon and the nitrogen, various groups of animals have their own signatures. Here you have the mammoth, a horse, reindeer. We can tell by looking at the human bones that they're way up here. Now, there are ways of determining what composition of the prey animals that you would have to eat in order to reach that signature for the humans. And on the basis of this, they say that these cavemen, these Paleolithic humans, would have had to have eaten about 65% of their diet made up of mammoth meat. What's also interesting about this is that these dogs, the domesticated wolves, are eating another type of a diet. They're down here. And these little dots up here are actually Mediterranean Paleolithic people, and they're eating a lot of fish. But what's very interesting about this type of isotopic analysis is that we can actually get an insight into what these individuals were eating. So here you have the cavemen eating primarily mammoth. The dogs, the domesticates, are eating an entirely different group of animals. Now, what the authors of this paper have done, they've got out on a limb a bit. And what they're saying is that, well, in societies where you have a relationship where the dogs are fed different food, they aren't hunting. And what the hypothesis is that they were keeping these dogs tied and perhaps using them for transportation. Now, this is 30,000 years ago. There's an alternative hypothesis where the dogs were actually hunting. And this is one of the things that gave these early modern humans the edge over the Neanderthals and were enabling them to ultimately take over Europe. But I want to fast forward a bit and come into the Neolithic period. The cavemen, these Paleolithic people, were living about 30,000 years ago. If we move forward 20,000 years, 25,000 years, into the period where humans were beginning to grow their own food, they also have the dogs. And one of the exciting pieces of research that's come out recently, this was in 2013, is the dogs are actually adapted to eat more starch than your wolves would be. The gray wolves are the closest living relatives of the modern dogs. And what you have here is an enzyme called amylase. And the more copies of the amylase gene you have, the better you are at digesting starch. Now, what the assumption is that these dogs that were living through the Neolithic period with humans were adapting also to that starch diet. And I actually know this from personal experience. My husband was a social anthropologist, spent many years living in Nigeria. And in Nigeria, they fed the dogs rice. And so this seems to be a biological adaptation of modern dogs. Now, we have the same thing in humans. Because, again, in an earlier piece of research in 2007, humans actually have many more copies of the amylase gene than do chimpanzees. And in humans, it's the amylase in your saliva. So the more copies of the amylase gene you have in your saliva, the best you can start to pre-digest your food when you're eating. And what's very interesting about this is these gray columns indicate the number of amylase copies in your saliva that you have in populations that have had a long history of eating starch. So this one is the Japanese, this one are Euro-Americans, and here you have the Hadza that Kristen Hawkes must have talked about when she was here last month. and they eat a lot of underground tubers, underground storage organs. The other societies are primarily hunters and gatherers, and you have an Eskimo group here that don't have a history of eating starch. Now, what's also interesting about this is just late last year, a paper in Nature Genetics actually has shown that the more copies of the amylase gene you have in your saliva, the less likely you are to be obese. Now, both of these in humans and dogs are examples of biological evolution that's happened in the recent past. The other major example is with the ability to digest milk. And similar to the starch story, you have a adaptation to digest milk in the areas where you've had a long history of reliance on domesticated animals, where you have pastoralists and all. So this particular chart shows lactose persistence phenotype frequencies. This means a phenotype is just what you look like, what you're able to do. So this is the persistence of the ability to digest milk. And again, centered in Europe, Scandinavia, West Africa with their pastoralist populations, and in East Africa and through the Middle East. So another example of biological adaptation. Now, in talking about this, I don't want to give the impression that the Neolithic was some type of utopia, because it actually wasn't. There's a colleague of mine, Clark Spencer Larson, who's at Ohio State, who spent the majority of his career looking at the effect of the Neolithic on the human body, transitioning from the Paleolithic into a Neolithic type of adaptation. A lot of his work has been done at a fantastic site in central Turkey called Çatalhöyük, which you can see is quite a large urban conglomeration. But what he's found is that in comparison to the Paleolithic, moving into the Neolithic, the stature of the humans dropped by about 2, 3, 4 inches. Signs of morbidity, things like anemia, periods of dietary related illness. You tend to have the evidence that individuals were not as healthy as they were when they were living during the Paleolithic. A lot of this is due to a restricted diet, where they're eating much more of the same type of food. They're already eating a lot more starch. We think that the transition in starch eating from was about 30 to 35% in the Paleolithic, up through to about 50%. But when you began to count up all of the pathologies you begin to see, you wonder really what the advantage of the Neolithic revolution was, other than providing food for larger numbers in the population. And there is also an argument that having a ready availability of carbohydrates and starches were actually important to females in terms of providing them with the energy and fuel for successful reproduction. But in any case, with the cavities, we really have the onset of cavities when we have our Neolithic populations. And what's also sort of fun about this is another genetic fun fact, Streptococcus mutans. This is the bacteria in your mouth that is closely related with the development of caries. And what the geneticists have shown us is that this bacteria, Streptococcus mutans, just expanded and exploded about 10,000 years ago in connection with the Neolithic Revolution. What they were doing is finding their own niche in our mouth with the starch, infected little place. And it was paradise for the bacteria. Now, what's also interesting about this is the closest relative of Streptococcus mutans is Streptococcus rati. And the rats have a very similar colonization of the bacteria in their mouth. And the question is whether the human Streptococcus actually jumped the species from the rats. Because, of course, the rats became a huge problem during the Neolithic in terms of grain stores and this type of thing. Now, I cheated a little bit with this picture. It was actually hard to find a very good picture of a Neolithic mouth full of cavities. This particular one was done by a student of mine, Isabelle de Groot, and she was working in the site in Morocco in North Africa. It's not a Neolithic site. It's from the Paleolithic. But these people have about 90% of the skeletons they have are full of cavities like this. And they seem to have been eating acorns. And the starch in the acorns were causing this absolutely unbelievable dental pathology in terms of what we know of the cavities in prehistory. There are very, very few of the earlier fossils that have caries. This particular fossil is Kabwe Man. He's also known as Broken Hill. Comes from Zambia. Dates somewhere between 300,000 and 125,000 years ago. And you can see the condition of this guy. Virtually every tooth has a cavity in it. From the side, you have apical abscesses. You also have masticator abscesses. No one knows what caused this. My PhD advisor used to say, oh, it must have had a source of honey and all. But whatever it was doing, it's extremely rare. And as you move back into the prehistoric record, what you have are the fossils with almost perfect teeth. Okay, now what we've been talking about here is just the tip of the iceberg of human evolution. The last fossil, Homo heidelbergensis, that I just showed you is right up there, right below the red horizontal line. We've got 7 million years here of human evolution. And we've got a variety of different types of fossils and a variety of different types of diets. And it's actually the dietary variation that's helped our human species, our human ancestors, to move out of Africa. The top chart is the migration that occurred about 2 million years ago, where we have the earliest states in East Africa moving into Georgia at the site of Dmanisi, and then we have other early sites in Asia. You can't move like this if you're adapted to a specific diet, because you're moving through so many different habitats. This later chart at the bottom is the migration of anatomically modern humans that occurred way up here at the top. But the point is that to be human, we need to be flexible. Okay, now I find it much easier to organize this long human ancestry in a chart like this. There's basically 2 branches to it. And we can approach it quite simply. This early group are the ape men. They're basically the Australopithecines. If you saw them on the street, you would think you were seeing a chimpanzee standing up on 2 legs. Now, if we go back to the stable isotope analyses, it's only these earlier fossils down here about 4 million to 4.5 million years ago, known as Ardipithecus, that have a diet that resembles the diet of living chimpanzees. So basically forest foods, fruits, and this type of thing. As we move up into this area, we move into the time of Australopithecus afarensis. And this, of course, is the time period of the famous Lucy. Now, if you analyze the afarensis material, as well as some of the other different species we have at this time period, you get a huge range of variation. And what seems to be happening is that the ancestors at this point are adapting to food resources found outside of a strictly forested environment. they're adapting to food resources that would be found in a more open habitat. We don't know specifically what it is, but again, the genetics can come back and give us an idea. Because we found that one of the things that has been lost since the division from the chimpanzees, as we move up into more recent hominids, is the ability to taste some types of bitterness. So something that may taste very bitter to a chimpanzee wouldn't necessarily taste bitter to us. And one of the hypotheses here is that we were adapting to eating the underground storage organs, that and we've lost the ability to taste the bitter essence of these. Now, as we move on up, we come into the nutcracker men. And this is Australopithecus boisei, Australopithecus robustus. These are the fossils that were originally found by Lewis and Mary Leakey and are now known throughout East Africa and South Africa. And they seem to have veered off in a direction very different from anything that modern species eat. They're eating almost entirely food resources found in a very dry environment. And what we don't know about this is specifically the type of food that they were eating. They weren't eating grass. Their teeth aren't adapted to that. But one of the ideas is they were eating either these underground storage organs or sedges. There would be the roots and bulbs growing in more moist and open country habitats. Now, what I've been interested in is what's actually happening on this other branch as you move from the Australopithecines, and this is a reconstruction of Lucy, up through the period of 3 million years ago, finally to modern humans. And the size increase isn't an exaggeration. One of the mysteries is where we were getting our nutrition to actually fuel this huge body. Now, what we know if we begin to look at a comparative analysis here is that the larger your body size is, the larger your home range is. And with a large home range, you're, of course, in a position to be able to expand, and this was one of the prerequisites for being able to move out of Africa in that original expansion. We also know, and this is some of Dan Lieberman's work, so do come in May when he's speaking, because in analyzing some of the fossil material from this time period of around 2 to 1.5 million years, the skeleton here is a beautiful early Homo erectus skeleton from the eastern part of Lake Turkana in Kenya. And what he's done is showing that there's many adaptations here that would suggest that the hominids at this time period were adapted to long distance running. And the idea is that this running was associated with diet. It was an adaptation at this time for hunting. There is some fun facts associated with this. One of the earliest genetic adaptation or genetic analyses of adaptation had to do with the myosin gene that expresses in your masticatory muscles, your chewing muscles. And looking at the ancestry of this, we seem to have lost the ability to express this gene in the masticatory muscles sometime around 2.5 million years ago. And it correlates with a reduction in the size of the face, a reduction in the size of the teeth, and what seems to be a radically changed adaptation to our ability to chew. One other thing that, one of my favorite examples are tapeworms at this time period, because the closest living relative of human tapeworms are tapeworms found in African wild dogs and hyenas. And again, this seems to have occurred about this time period of 2.5 to 2 million years ago. There would have had to have been an opportunity for the tapeworm to jump species. This also correlates with our first appearance of stone tools, which is about 2.5 million years ago, and with the first appearance that we see of cut marks on bones that would indicate that the early humans were beginning to use animal-based foods and beginning to use tools to actually remove the animal-based food from the bones. Now, my own research has evolved brain size. So in this particular chart, we go down to 3.5 million years up to the present day. This is cranial capacity across the top. For this period leading up to the appearance of our own genus Homo, which is at about 2.5, we have virtually no change in brain size. And all of a sudden, about 2 million years ago, you have this rapid expansion in the human brain size. And then it carries on again and increases gradually into modern humans. Now, the human brain is extremely expensive. Here we have a chimpanzee brain, and that's a little bit smaller, not much, than we have in these early Australopithecines. The large modern human brain, that's about a third again the size of the maximum brain size in this period of about 2 million years ago. The question is how do we fuel not only our large body size, but also our large brain size? We know if we look at in a comparative context, relative dietary quality and relative brain size. The lower the diet quality you have, the smaller the brain you tend to have if you're a primate. And here's humans up here. But we also know that humans had a problem, because here are log body weight and dietary quality. The larger body size animal you are, you tend to have a lower quality diet. Humans have bucked this trend, and we have a much higher quality diet than would be expected for our body size. Now, my own interest in this started with these two simple diagrams. You have body weight on the bottom of both of them, and here you have basal metabolic rate. This is the amount of energy that it takes to run your body when you're actually doing nothing. So it's your resting body metabolism. And humans here have the same basal metabolic rate as you would expect of an animal of our body size. The problem is that we have a much larger brain size than we would expect from our basal metabolic rate. Now, each gram of brain tissue costs about 20 times more than each gram of muscle tissue. So if we have this degree of difference in brain size, where we have a much larger brain than you would expect, the question is, where is the energy that runs that brain? Now, this was a problem that a colleague of mine, Peter Wheeler, who's at Liverpool John Moores University, sat down to try to see if we could find a solution to. And what we found is that in humans, as all other organisms, there's a series of very expensive organs. Your brain is very expensive to run, so is your gut, as well as your kidneys, heart and liver. And we were very surprised to see that we have almost a perfect trade-off between brain size and gut size. Now, this was published in 1995, and it's become known as brains and guts in human evolution. And with this, if you're going to have a small gut, you have to have a high-quality diet. So, and at the time we proposed this, the only high quality diet we could think of was animal-based food. And at this time period in the archaeological record, you get a lot of long bones that are smashed to get the marrow out of them. I mean, these fellows weren't eating, sort of tough muscle meat. I think they were going for the brains, they were going for the internal organs, they were going for the marrow inside of the bone. Food that would be easy to digest. Small packets of food that had very high nutritional quality. Now, if you have easy to digest food, you can have small guts. So what we have here is that, if we were a non-human primate of our same body size, say a chimpanzee, with a very small brain and a very large gut, you would have the same basal metabolic level as if you had a very large brain and a very small gut. And we felt that this was basically a prime releaser, that in order to evolve a large brain in human evolution, we would have to evolve a small gut to balance the basal metabolic rate. And it would be, of course, associated with many of the other pieces of the evidence of dietary change we have at this time period. Now, it would have a tremendous number of implications. One is this first migration out of Africa. Because if you're moving from niche to niche to niche to niche, and you're adapted, say, as the robust Australopithecines are, to specific food resources, those aren't transferable. You can't pack those in a suitcase. But a animal-based diet is totally transferable. It's not really important what species they are. You're a hunter, and this is a very general type of a food resource. Now, it has other implications. What do you do with the kids? Because in non-human primates, you normally don't share food. And as soon as the kids come off the breast, they begin foraging for their own food. There's no food sharing, or very little food sharing between mother and infant. Once you get into a diet that it takes skill, it takes practice, it's dangerous, the young kids aren't going to be able to forage for themselves. So immediately you have a situation set up that you have to have some type of cooperation. You also have a very serious problem for the women. And I'm going to blow this picture up because I think it's so good. I have this hanging in my office, and every time I think I'm having a bad day, I sort of think about her. And you actually can't see it, but there's a cave bear mother in the darkness there with two of her cubs. But think of what this is telling us about human adaptation. Because what a female would have to do is gather or hunt the food to support her own large body weight, to support her own large brain size. We have the problem with the kids. She would have to support an infant who was off the breast. She may be nursing another infant, and she may already be pregnant with a third. How does she do it? The answer is developing cooperation and economic division of labor. You don't tend to have this type of a situation in any non-human primate group, but it's energetically determined. Now, if you heard Kristen Honk's lecture last month, this is where the grandmother hypothesis comes. Because what she argues is that the help for the mother came from the grandmother, and that the grandmother would have a genetic reason to share food with her daughter and her granddaughter, because she's basically keeping her genes alive. And according to Kristen's argument, this also would lead into the evolution of a post-reproductive lifespan for human females, because the longer your mother lived, the more resources that could be fed into you to be fed into the grandkids, and the greater probability of survival. And so what the argument here is that you have a feedback loop going that ultimately ends in longevity and a post-reproductive lifespan for human females. Okay, now things are never simple, and things change. And my colleague Richard Wrangham from Harvard basically got involved with some of our arguments about brains and guts and high quality food. His argument is that cooking was the key. He basically argues that if these hominids had the same physiology as we do, and this is a big question, we don't know, that they wouldn't be able to physically eat enough raw food in order to support their large body weight and in order to support their large brain size. And he basically looks at cooking as a biological trait, that if we were going to enter into this dietary shift that seems to have happened at this important time period in human evolution, the only way we could have done it with those small teeth, with those small jaws, with those weak masticatory muscles, is if we had started cooking food at this time period. Now, it's a wonderful hypothesis. The only problem with it is that there's no physical evidence that this was happening at this time period. We don't get fire consistently in archaeological sites until much more recently in time. And it's actually quite a mystery of what was going on, because some of his arguments for cooking are so compelling that you think that it would have to have happened. But the physical evidence is totally missing. In fact, in the fall, my foundation is running a workshop and symposium actually on the evolution of fire, hoping to move this argument forward a bit. But coming back to the dietary story and the brains and guts, the payoff between brains and guts isn't universal, and you wouldn't expect it to be universal, because in all animal species, the brain size isn't perhaps the critical factor. For example, in birds, there's no payoff between brain size and gut size, but there tends to be a payoff between brain size and the size of the pectoral muscles. So the more energy they put into flying, the less energy they put into the brain and the smaller brain size, and vice versa. It also doesn't work in bats. You know, and the reason people have chosen birds and bats to test the hypothesis is that they're smaller animals and data are available. But it does actually work in some other species. For example, it works in fish. And there's quite a fun story about this, because the author here, Jason Kaufman, was a student, and he was giving a poster presentation at one of our physical anthropology meetings. And I was standing there looking at it. I had my name tag turned around. And he was going on about how he didn't believe this hypothesis and all of this. And he said he was totally floored that in the species of fish, Gnathonemus, that you had a clear trade-off between brain size and gut size, and that the fish uses approximately 60% of their energy to support the brain size. So it's an aquatic parallel for humans. And it's also interesting with this is that this has been found in a number of other species of fish. Okay, where we're going with this. Colleagues from Zurich have gathered a tremendous database of organ size in something like 500 different animals in a variety of different species. And what they've found is that there's no relationship universally between brain size and gut size tied in with diet. And you wouldn't expect this from the examples that I just showed. But what they actually do find is there's a clear relationship between brain size and adipose tissue, or fat. Now, we all know about fat. But what their argument is the brain size is in your insurance policy that gives you very flexible behavior. Your fat is also an insurance policy that allows you to live through times of famine and starvation. And their argument about humans and our unique adaptation is we have both the large brain size and the ability to store fat. So we basically have a double insurance policy. Now, again, following their arguments, the reason we can do this, they claim, comes down to our efficiency of locomotion. Bipedal walking is much more energy efficient than quadrupedal walking or even bipedal walking in chimpanzees. And they argue that the reason that many other animals can't carry the fat that we can is because it costs them more in terms of locomotion to carry that fat around. And this isn't as serious of a problem in humans as it is in other animals. Now, what they've done is they developed a model that incorporates a lot of what I've been talking about. They have increased energy input, would give you a larger brain, also a change in energy allocation. So up here we have our improved dietary quality, our energy subsidies, cooperative breeding, sharing of food. You aren't necessarily responsible for your own personal resources. We have stabilized energy supply, avoid of starvation. This would be your fat. We have locomotion costs, lowering our cost of movement. And we also have production here. In terms, one of the arguments that I do have with them is they actually discount this trade-off of the organs, the physiological trade-off. So here you have your humans, your chimps. This would be the level of energy if you didn't have that payoff between the brain size and the gut size. And the reason they discount this is they don't think it's a universal feature. But we do have it in many other species, in pythons. Before they're ready to eat, they pump up their digestive system. When they've digested the food, they close that system down. We have migratory birds. Before they go on their 1,000 miles migration, they shut down their digestive systems, again, as an energy-saving device. So what we have with this system is a way to integrate across species all of the things I've been talking about: cooperation, sharing, grandmothers, the problem with the females. One of the things that I haven't mentioned is the growth factor in this. Because humans have a very different system in terms of timing of growth than other animals have. We have this post-reproductive lifespan, but we also have a very extended childhood period. And human brains and chimpanzee brains are very different. Chimpanzees are born with a much larger brain size at birth, and the growth is much less than it is in a human child. In the human growth phase, the brain of a young child takes up about 60% of the entire energy allocation. One way during the growth process that we balance this is by slowing the growth of the body while the brain is at its most expansive. And this is about 5 years of age. This side is girls, this side is boys. And as the brain slows in its energy requirements, you have an uptake in the human growth. So you have a large number of trade-offs going here. Some are centered on the food and some aren't. Now, coming back to the whole picture of human evolution, we have the system that's operating as we move up this 3 million year period. When I first started research in this, we thought that it all happened about 2 million years ago. We thought that you had this radical increase in body size, this sudden change to a meat-based diet, the sudden expansion of the brain. If we bring Christensen-Hawkes hypotheses here, this would be when we evolved longevity. This would be when we evolved the post-reproductive lifespan. What we found in the last 20 years is that all of these features are part of our evolutionary trajectory, but they're coming in at different times. There's some indication that you have more intensive meat eating, even coming down in the early Australopithecine period. There's indication that you have the increase in body size moving up in this time period between 2.5 to 2 million years ago. In terms of longevity and perhaps the post-reproductive lifespan, there's other evidence that it may not come in to much more recent periods in time. We also have a larger number of species than we had, say, 20 years ago. And what seems to be happening is that the line that ultimately produces modern humans is the one that got it right. Down here in the 2 million year period, you have Homo erectus. You have the robust Australopithecines dying out. And then in more recent time periods, you have, again, a proliferation of species. Now, there's a lot of work going on to sort out what's actually happening. This was a conference that we ran a few years ago on human biology and how it can inform the origins of modern humans. We had diet people here, we had the energetics people, we had the archaeologists. The results of this have been published in an open access issue of Current Anthropology. So if you're interested in reading in more detail about any of these things, all you have to do is Google Current Anthropology and it'll come up. We've also, a few months ago, published a summary paper of this in Science, trying to look at what the significant factors during this very important period of our human evolutionary history actually was. So what I can leave you with in terms of this rather rapid run through the human evolutionary record is there's no one particular caveman diet. It depends how you define a caveman. We've also had diet become very important at various stages as we move through the human evolutionary record. And it's actually our diversity in diet that's been our success and our ability to adapt to a variety of different challenges and resources. So I'd like to acknowledge a number of people that have helped me over the years with this, and particularly leave you with our human evolutionary relatives. And I hope you'll be able to think a bit about what the challenges they faced, what they were eating, whether they lived past 30 years of age, and whether there's any lessons for us in studying this deep time in human evolutionary history. Thank you very much.